What if I told you that there is an arc in Tokyo Ghoul Re that is absolute perfection down to the bone? This arc has perfect stakes, perfect setup, perfect characters, and a perfect payoff. The arc that I'll be talking about would be the Tsukiyama extermination arc from Tokyo Ghoul Re. And of course, I'm talking about the manga. Well, before I get into this video and preach about the greatness of this arc, I'm gonna need y'all to make sure and hit the like, comment, subscribe buttons. It'll really mean a lot to me, and it really supports me going forward. Now, with that out the way, let's dive into this arc. One of the reasons why this arc is so great is because of the conflicts. It doesn't feel like any of the characters' motivations for going against somebody or something else are forced. They all feel believable. There are three in particular that I feel are pivotal and elite for this arc. Starting with the conflict between Karen and Sasaki. Now, in the beginning, Kanae is a character that we are made to believe would do almost anything to get his master Shuu into better shape, even if that meant committing the most heinous acts. Now, this isn't just for Shuu, but in the beginning this is also his undying loyalty to the household of the Tsukiyamas as a whole. The reason for this being is because when his family got massacred in Germany, they were the only household who would take him in as a child. As the chapters go on in its arc, Kanae is met with the tough choice. Hori, who is Tsukiyama's human friend, proposes a possible future in which, because of his actions of trying to find a new meal for Shuu, he is also indirectly drawing attention from the doves to the Tsukiyama family. As we know, in the future, this is what triggers the Tsukiyama extermination. So in the end, Kanae is brought with the choice of sacrificing the family that he is in debt to save his beloved, or sacrifice his beloved to the family he is in debt to. Hori also claims to know of a way to bring Shuu back, but Kanae refuses and dismisses her as a little mouse. A couple chapters on, Kanae is still thinking about the decision whether he should sacrifice his family to save Shuu or sacrifice Shuu to save the family. We then get a flashback to probably the beginning of Kanae's journey in the Tsukiyama household, seeing as he still looks relatively young. In this flashback, Kanae is in the Tsukiyama family's mansion, and it appears to be raining outside, while Shuu is still outside. So Shuu's father asks Kanae, like the rightful servant he is, to go bring Shuu an umbrella. Kanae agrees and steps out. What he had seen next will give us a great hint about his character and his conflict with Sasaki. As he arrives outside to hand Shuu his umbrella, he sees Shuu having fun chatting with Hori, in which he quotes, "Master Shuu has a very big heart. He may offer his benevolence to lowly humans at times, but that impartial smile of his, I wish that he wouldn't show it to humans." This gives us a sneak peek into Kanae's jealousy. A chapter later, we see Kanae running through the woods with quote-unquote hate all over the panel. She then goes into an inner monologue and says that she hates her loyalty to the Tsukiyamas, because if it wasn't for her loyalty, she would kill Kaneki Ken, and Sasaki Haise, and Chihori, and would probably sacrifice the household for his beloved Shuu. But because his loyalty is there, it's sort of like an anchor holding him back from his selfish desires of having Shuu all to himself. So then Kanae asks Matsumae, another member of the household, if she had to choose between the house and Shuu, what would she choose? In which Matsumae replies to Kanae, asking him who he serves. After this, we see a monologue inside Kanae's head that answers this question, and forms his next steps moving forward. I serve the Tsukiyama family, and Master Shuu. Having to choose between the two is ridiculous. Saving Master Shuu as a Tsukiyama family retainer, that's what I want. But right now, it's difficult for even the Tsukiyama family to make a move. After these words, Kanae actually develops to hear out Chihori's proposition, a little mouse, or a lowly human as he would call it. After he chats with Hori, Hori tells him that the only way that they could bring Shuu back to normal is to tell him that Ken Kaneki is alive, in which after hearing, Kanae's face gets visibly disturbed, and he asks if it's some type of joke. He then follows it up by saying, "Don't you think that I've already thought of that?" He then carries on until he's interrupted. If you think that will bring Master Shuu back, if you notice how that is bolded out, you can clearly see by Kanae's facial expression and bolded words that Kanae does not seem very fond of the idea of mentioning Kaneki Ken to Shuu, which plays in very well with his pre-established character trait of jealousy. But after a couple panels of Hori explaining to Kanae that Kaneki-ken's death is the reason of Shu's recent behavior, Kanae quickly realizes that if he gets rid of the cause, Shuu could go back to normal. He also recognizes that this could be a hard task considering Kaneki is now a CCG investigator, and going to meet him could end in backlash for the Tsukiyama family. Knowing this, Kanae accepts Hori's proposal and asks him what he needs to do next. Subconsciously, here Kanae is once again, putting his family on the line for Shuu. Hori hands Kanae the picture of Sasaki to give to Shuu. Shuu will recognize that this is Kaneki and believe that his dear Kaneki is alive and well. This will end up improving his health. After showing the pictures, Kanae then goes with Shuu to go meet Sasaki in person. After a couple chapters, Kanae is now having second thoughts about risking his family's well-being so that Shuu can meet his investigator friend. But Kanae, being Kanae, does it anyway, because Shuu is the man he loves and devotes himself to. So for that very reason, seeing Shuu happy would be enough for Kanae. Or so we thought. The next chapter, we see that one of the Tsukiyama family's men has gotten captured and tortured, in which a video of his torture has been recorded and posted everywhere on the CCG website. With the video going viral, the family becomes aware of it and Tsukiyama comes up with a plan to use Haise, or as he sees him, Kaneki, to free the tortured Tsukiyama. But while Tsukiyama is blinded by Kaneki's ghost, believing that Haise is still Kaneki, Kanae on the other hand is glad to see that his master is so motivated, but then questions if his plan will really work with a nervous face. Being blinded by his love for his master, he again goes along with Shu's foolish request. Then, a page after, he gets on the phone with Hori, and Hori asks him to obey all of Tsukiyama's requests, no matter what. In which Kanae's inner monologue, he states that he would do that anyways, because that is his quote-unquote glorious Master Shuu. This wording really emphasized Kanae's idolization and admiration for his master, in claiming that he doesn't need anyone to tell him whatever his master asks for him. The interruptance of the cues between Sasaki and Tsukiyama's first conversation, Tsukiyama states that he can't get close enough to Kaneki because the little ones are in his way. Later that night, Kanae decides that the best way to give his master what he wants is to get rid of the cues by force. So Kanae hires Agiri tree ghouls to attack Sasaki and his cues, and kill them, all except for Sasaki. This scene further enforces Kanae's desire to make his master happy and give him what he wants, no matter the cost. However, the attack fails, and Kanae is brutally defeated by Ure, in which he flees until he bumps into a familiar face. "Hello, Kanae," says Eto. Kanae does not recognize the person in front of him, so is already on his toes. Eto then asks Kanae what he thinks she is, and if he guesses right, then he will be granted an apple. "Are you trying to play games with me, child? I don't care what you are, but you can satisfy my hunger." Kanae attacks Eto, but gets absolutely stomped by Eto's Kagane. Eto then asks Kanae if he's read the book of Genesis, in which he replies yes. Eto remarks that she likes the book and goes on to speak about it. The apple is the fruit of knowledge. It's also called the forbidden fruit. I wonder why God planted the fruit of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. It's so mean, don't you think? It's as if he's telling them to eat it. Eto then goes further to ask Kanae if he's religious and what his vision of God is. After which, Kanae says my imagined God is not an almighty father, but a child with extraordinary power. With the child bolded out, Kanae here could be referring to Shuu, because we know how Shuu is basically all Kanae cares about, and he is willing to sacrifice everything, even his home, for Shuu. You could say that this level of devotion that Kanae presents towards Shuu could also be the level of devotion that a religious man could for their god. Eto then asks Kanae in a monologue. She then goes on, "Don't you think so much in this world is defective? For example, A loser like you who can't serve his master or fulfill his own desires, you went after the cues, not for your master, but to make Haise Sasuke suffer, right? As vengeance for your master who never regained his senses no matter how hard you tried, but he managed it when Haise appeared. Your master regained his spirit. It's not fair. Eto then goes on to state that from the beginning, in the name of serving his master, Kanae tried to hurt what Haise holds dear, so that he could rejoice in his suffering. Eto then goes further to state that Kanae has no compassion for his master, because if he did, his master is happy, so why isn't Kanae happy? You actually want to kill Haise, don't you? You don't truly wish for your master's recovery. Eto keeps going by saying that those days that Shuu was incapacitated were the days that Kanae actually enjoyed, because he was able to have him all to himself, because Kanae had actually viewed those days as perfect. There is no reason to love somebody who doesn't love you back. Let's break it. Your loyalty is just your selfish desire to have Shuu for yourself. Eto ends her speech by saying what Kanae needs is an apple, and knowledge and power, in exchange for Kanae's life. Then says, I will be your god. And the last thing to set up the conflict between Kanae and Haise is when Kanae gets tortured and Eto states that to become precious to someone, you have to take away what's important to them. Don't worry, you will be loved this time. After the next panel showcasing the result of Kanae's torture, we now have Kanae's new motivation to kill Haise and take Shuu for himself, giving in to his selfish desires and developing into the monster that he is going to do to kill Haise Sasuke. Now we'll be moving on to Shuu and Haise's conflict in this arc. Shu's arc in Tokyo Ghoul Re starts with him recovering from his terrible state after finding out Kaneki is indeed alive. After finding this out, he instantly gains his motivation back to go to crazy lengths to go see Kaneki, even disregarding his own safety. When Shuu eventually does get to see Kaneki as Haise for the first time with Kanae, he completely disregards his own safety and charges at Haise as if Haise would know who he is. Because in Shu's mind, he believes that Kaneki would never forget him, and Shuu desperately desires to have the times he did with Kaneki back in part 1 in Re. He wants those days to come back. But as he arrives to Kaneki, he falls physically and metaphorically as he realizes that after their brief meeting, that yes, Kaneki does not recognize him, and Shuu seems devastated by this fact. As he gets home, Shuu has locked himself in his room, searching for ways that he can get Kaneki to regain his memory, since he has now accepted the fact that he has. Shuu briefly mentions squash, which seems to be a callback to something he and Kaneki had done together in the midst of his reminiscing of good times. Ishida does a great job of little phrases like this, emphasizing how a character is feeling, like how Shuu wants the days of he and Kaneki to get her back. After watching the video that Kijima had posted on the CCG website, Shuu comes to the conclusion that it was his fault that his family was hurt, and also asks if the rest of the family was harvesting for him while he was on his bad health shit. They deny it, but this is an attempt to make Shuu not feel responsible for what happened. Shuu, however, sees through this and expresses that he just wants to see his family members happy. After the loss of her husband, Shuu says that he has an idea to rescue her husband for her. However, Shu's plan seems to be involving Haise, as he plans to use him as a means to sneak into the CCG and rescue his family. Kanae asks, how does he think that Haise will be able to do this because of how difficult the task is? But Shu's undying faith in Kaneki leads him to believe that if Haise regains his memory and becomes Kaneki, he will help them and be able to do it no matter what. Shuu develops as a character and expresses a new motivation to bring Kaneki's memories back. He also claims to know that Kaneki does not want to be a ghoul investigator. Or does he? Shuu then meets Haise for the first time and has his first conversation with him. But, being blinded by the ghost of Kaneki, he keeps listing things that he knows Kaneki likes, but Haise isn't particularly as fond of. So he becomes puzzled and tries to carry on the conversation, but it gets interrupted by the cues. After their conversation, Shuu continues to try and talk to him alone, so that he can get closer to Haise and try to regain his memory. But each time, Shuu is unable to get him alone because of the cues. Later, Shuu calls back to a conversation that he had with Chihori, the day of Anteku's destruction. He asks her, "What is gastronomy?" She doesn't know the answer, but gastronomy is the art of preparing and serving rich or delicate and appetizing food, which is basically how Shuu would like to hunt his meals in part 1. But Kaneki was the meal that he wanted for an ingredient. In this case, his ingredient would be Kaneki. So, Hori is basically asking Shuu if he would die for Kaneki, in which we do not get to see his answer. Shuu then asks himself how the others at Anteku would be doing. So he assumes that they would all love to see him at the end of Volume 4. We see Shuu walk into the cafe for the first time while Toka greets him. Upon entering, Tsukiyama bombards Toka with questions about if she knows about Sasaki, and if she does, then why doesn't she do anything for him to regain his memory? But right then, Nishiki stops him. Nishiki basically asks Tsukiyama, what about after he regains his memory? And Nishiki elaborates on that by asking Tsukiyama if he's seen the life that Kaneki has been living since he's turned into Haise. Tsukiyama says he's seen his new life now, and the fact that he would never thought of Kaneki turning into a CCG investigator. Nishiki tries to clarify Tsukiyama's selfish request by saying, "So you want him to leave his life right now and come back to us?" Tsukiyama replies this by saying yes, and he thinks Kaneki will also want that. Just then, Toka asks Tsukiyama if he wants to turn Kaneki back into a ghoul, so that he can be hunted again. Tsukiyama denies this, but fails to realize that this is what he indirectly means by saying that he wants to bring Kaneki back. Toka also goes on to ask him if Tsukiyama would just brush off the last 2 years of Haise that he's lived and fill in the gaps. Toka states that no part of Haise is Kaneki, and that it's better if Kaneki doesn't come back to the cafe. The only way she would support if his memory came back, she finalizes her statement after telling Tsukiyama that it's his ego that wants to bring Kaneki back. To leave the cafe, Tsukiyama tells him that he's fine with being egotistical, and he promises to get Kaneki's memories back. Tsukiyama remarks on the words said by Toka about his ego and states that that is not his sole motivation for getting Kaneki back. A Tsukiyama family member put pressure on Shuu, saying that she wants to save the family member that got tortured on the CCG website, and she's gonna go save him. But Tsukiyama reassures her that there's no need to do so, and that he will pay back her and her family's sacrifices for him when he was in bad health, and he will get the Tsukiyama family member back from the CCG. After this, Tsukiyama goes to go meet Kaneki. He gets an inner monologue and states that Kaneki needs to regain his memory, in a kind of a way that he's sort of relying on Kaneki in this situation to return and, help him out. But then he meets with Haise. They chat for a bit. Tsukiyama wonders how he can make Kaneki regain his memories, until suddenly Haise asks Shuu if he's a ghoul. To Shuu's shock, he panics and wonders if it's a trap. After a series of questions, Shuu's mind is going crazy with the way he sees Kaneki behave as an investigator, until Haise asks Shuu if he knew Kaneki. Just when Haise asks Shuu this, Shuu thinks to himself and about Kaneki's past, and says, the past you're trying to uncover could be more horrific than you can imagine, but then snaps out of it, and thinks that it's a good thing if Haise regains his memory. Shuu then asks Haise, all the changes that might bring to your life, are you ready to give up on what you have now? Haise replies with no. Just then, Shuu realizes that when Hori asked him if he'd die for an ingredient, she knew he'd say no, and Shuu develops at this point, thinking that there are too many precious things in this world to live for, to die for just one ingredient. But Shuu also realized that Kaneki wasn't just an ingredient. He was also something more, and the times that he spent with Banjo and the gang weren't just so that he could prep the ingredient, but because he was also having fun, genuinely. Shuu leaves claiming that he no longer was sure of himself. Final conflict that I would like to cover. And this would be the conflict between Haise and Kaneki. At the end of last arc, Haise had developed and made a decision to instead trying to erase Kaneki and get rid of him. He then sees Hinami come to Kaneki's aid and realized how much Kaneki was loved. Henceforth, he stops shunning Kaneki and accepts him, and he makes the decision to save him instead of letting the last 20 years of his life be forgotten. After the auction, Haise stays up researching about Kaneki so we can find out more about him and stop him from disappearing. However, later that night, Eto ships Haise a mask, and on the mask is written, "To Kaneki Ken, happy birthday." A short time skip occurs, and we next see a promotional ceremony for the CCG, so they all get their ranks. You can also see that on Haise, the black part of his hair, which was very less in the beginning of the story, has now faded out the white a little bit more, and it seems to be foreshadowing for what happens next. Haise is in the washroom washing his face, and he's also thinking about how his relationship and him saving Yotsume could impact his relationship with Akira, because Hinami was actually the person who was joint with Toka in killing Mato, who was Akira's father. He then thinks about letting Hinami go and letting her die because this could harm his relationship with Akira, keeping her alive. Because then he is dragged back into reality, and he realizes that he can't get Hinami killed because she's too important to Kaneki. But before he can finish the thought, he hears a voice in his head saying, "You too." Haise then receives sharp flashbacks to Mato and a person that heavily resembles Nishiki. He then turns to his right and hears, "I am me, you are you. There's only one body." After he sees a young Kaneki standing in front of him, talking about a parasite that infects moths and ultimately makes it so that there are two living things inside one body, which he uses as a metaphor to describe he and Haise's situation. "You cannot continue to live with me inside you. You'll be crushed if you find out anything more. Even if you do withstand knowing, you will end up where I am. Coexistence is impossible. Sabe, I question your sanity. You finally looked at me, Haise. This time, please don't make me disappear." As Haise had made up his mind to save Kaneki, it is implied here that he thought he could coexist with them within one body, in which Kaneki shuts this down by saying that coexistence is impossible. And after he says, "Haise, this time, don't make me disappear." So what this means is that Kaneki does not believe in the way that he and Haise can coexist, but only believes that one of them can be the dominant one. So he asks, "Haise, please don't make me disappear," as a way of saying to research for his memories. After the conversation with Kaneki in the washroom, he confronts Hinami in person and talks to her, but the words "I am me, you are you" echoes into Haise's mind, and he asks Hinami if she views him as Kaneki. Afterwards, telling her that he's sorry and he can never be Kaneki. Although Hinami agrees with Haise and tell him that he is himself and that he and Kaneki are different in many ways, but they both think the thing they both think things over like the same way, because they both brought their books when she was sad. She also explains to him that ever since Ken's gone, a lot of other people don't know what to do because they all liked Ken. Haise leaves and thinks about her situation and begins to feel sympathy for her, but because of his position as a ghoul investigator, he cannot take the side of a ghoul. But he can't help but feel bad for her because of her looming death coming, and even debates whether he can help. But he thinks that it's all pointless, because the main question in his mind is why she has to suffer like this at all. After a couple chapters, Haise decides to use the mask sent to him by Eto to gain information from public ghouls about Rose. But as he conducts and goes through with the mission, he meets ghouls who recognize the mask he is wearing and point out that it used to be Ken Kaneki's. Haise returns to the group and while touching his chin, says it didn't go so well. After finding out that ghouls recognize his mask, Haise goes back to base to research past documents about an eye patch ghoul. in which he finds drafts about a mission and the first sighting and encounter with the eye patch ghoul. The next document was a document about a sighting in the basement of Kano's lab. The documents end here with the name of the writer at the bottom, Kotaro Amon. We then cut to Kaneki and Heise's head saying, "I killed him. It's my fault. I killed Amon." Later, Sasuke goes to go get more information about Amon, but he is only given connections to the leads he already had. He then asks how Kotaro Amon died, but the person he asked did not have clearance to give out that information because it was restricted. Kaneki then asks Heise, "Why do you want to know about Eye Patch and Kotaro Amon?" In which Heise responds, "Why? For you. Saving you means knowing you." A couple chapters later, Heise decides to meet up with Shuu and ask him a lot of questions, such as if he knows Yotsume, Uta, and if he's a ghoul. Then, Heise says he doesn't need to answer those questions. Instead, he could only answer this: "Did you know Kaneki?" Heise explains that he was avoiding who he was and that he needs to come to terms with who he is now and find out who Kaneki was. He says he needs to do this because knowing about Kaneki might offer him relief and doesn't want Kaneki to disappear from inside his head. Shuu then asks him if he's willing to leave his life behind right now if he tells him. Heise responds with no. He elaborates on that when he went to go to use his mask to gain info, he recalls that ghouls could recognize him and feared him. He then says that he wants to be his own person, not a ghoul like Kaneki who was feared. He doesn't want to accept him. Heise wants his current life to continue, but he knows that somewhere inside him it can't. He goes to say that someday he will have to accept Kaneki. And it's not about emotion or logic, it's fate. That he has no choice but to accept Kaneki in the future. After Tsukiyama leaves, without answering Heise's questions, later that night Heise decides to look through more documents so that he could find more information when he runs into Akira, who asks him what he's doing here, when he should be preparing for the upcoming operation. Heise replies and says he's just looking through some past case operation results, and then cuts to the chase to ask her if she was assigned to the 20th ward. And that there's something he wants to ask her about it. Akira, however, seems to already know what Heise is going to ask. Is it about Kotaro Amon? Akira gives Heise a brief description about Amon and about his death, but Heise asks her, what about Eye Patch? In which Akira tries to avoid the question by leaving and telling him that he needs to prepare for the operation, and he doesn't need to know, but that just then, he surprises her. Heise yells, "Why don't you tell me? Is it because I'm Eye Patch? Is it because I killed Kotaro Amon? Do you know the fear of waking up and not knowing anything? The feeling of only having what you have been told to cling to? What? It's like not even knowing who your real parents are. Where did I even come from? Who am I?" Akira tries to calm him down by saying, "Calm down, Heise." But soon after she finishes, Heise yells and says, "I'm not Heise. I'm just..." But before he can finish, Akira embraces him and tells him, "Heise, you are you. Names don't matter." The Tsukiyama extermination operation begins shortly after this moment. What I like so much about these conflicts is that Ishida drops hints and clues to these conflicts earlier on in the series, and these hints are great at building up the final product. Once you really take in and appreciate the amount of subtle foreshadowing that Ishida does within a single page, it can really help you appreciate the beauty of his writing. For this section, all the conflicts intertwine, so I won't be switching from character to character like before. Now, after meeting with Sasuke, Shuu decides to go back home for the night, where he is thinking about Kanae, Yuma, and Kaneki, when all of a sudden, his dad barges in. His dad asks if something is bothering him, and then gives him a coffee to calm him down. Shuu thanks his father and drinks the coffee. He then remarks on how the coffee makes him feel wide awake. In the next panel, we see Shuu lying on the ground asleep, as Shu's dad orders Matsumai to take care of him. Just then, the CCG barge into the Tsukiyama family's household, where Tsukiyama's dad turns himself in, and all of his servants in to let Tsukiyama escape. The CCG quickly catch wind of this and go on a run to find Tsukiyama. The Tsukiyama family's successor, Shuu Tsukiyama, was cut to another vehicle so he could escape. In the car, Tsukiyama awakens and asks Matsumai where are they headed, because now he is in the backseat of a car where Matsumai is driving him. She then responds to him and lies, telling him that they are just going for a drive. Shuu shuts this lie down, and Matsumai finally comes clean and tells Shuu the Tsukiyama family is done. She also explains that his dad used him and all of his servants so that he and Matsumai could escape. Where? Shuu remembers this event similar to the owl suppression, where Yoshimaru and the others sacrificed their lives in order to save the rest of Onteku. Shuu orders Matsumai to turn back, but Matsumai refuses, telling him that because of his incompetence, the Tsukiyama family will end. But as long as he's alive, the blood of the Tsukiyama family will transform and endure. You are all that the family needs. Shuu realizes that everyone's lives are on his hands, and that he is the reason that his family is in a bad spot to begin with. Matsumai adds on by saying that if he cares for them too, begin with, he will not let their sacrifices go to waste. Shuu then finally realizes what it felt like for Kaneki when he jumped into the owl suppression and why he wasn't able to stop him then. They then arrive at the Lunar Eclipse building, where Tsukiyama will get a helicopter as the people below will fend off the CCG and he will escape safely. Tsukiyama notes as soon as he gets there, as he sees a lot of ghouls he'd never seen before that were willing to lay down their lives because of their connection to his father. While Shuu is taking the elevator to the helicopter, he realizes how great his father was. The CCG arrives shortly and commence the extermination. Below, Sasuke remarks how ruthless Haru is after witnessing the carnage that she and her squad laid on the ghouls. As the CCG are storming the building, Kuri tells Haise that he needs to know the situation on the roof. Haise uses his Kagane to get up to the roof, where he surprisingly gets there first and doesn't see anyone. We cut back to Shuu as he sees Matsumai and Milo getting ready to provide backup downstairs. He then asks why none of them are wearing their masks and asks them to promise that they will be back, in which Matsumai responds with a glance back at Shuu and says that she cannot promise that she will come back. All she can say to him is live, survive. My life has always belonged to you. Don't waste it. As they walk away, Shuu comments that that's not fair, Matsumai. As they leave and Shuu makes his way to the roof and remembers all the people who sacrificed themselves or he's lost due to himself. And as he arrives on the roof, he sees a lone person with the helicopter of his escape sent crashing down in flames. The next person that was standing in his path would be Haise Sasuke. Sasuke then realizes that Tsukiyama is the person that he was talking to before, and Shuu remarks on the situation as a ridiculous comedy. Kuri pages Sasuke and asks him what he sees on the roof, but Sasuke surprisingly says that there's no sign of him yet, so that he doesn't have to fight Shuu straight away. But actually, he wants to get more information out of Shuu, so that he can know about Kaneki and save him. Sasuke says that he wants to ask some questions before he resumes with the eradication, and Shuu responds and asks him, what does he want to know? Shuu carries on and says, do you want me to talk about you before you kill me? Which Sasuke says that if Shuu surrenders, then he will take charge of him and they won't have to fight and he won't kill Shuu. But after hearing the words, Shuu charges at Sasuke and drop kicks him, claiming that he will not surrender. He also states that all the people who sacrifice themselves mean nothing if this body is no longer living. He then develops as a character where he says, Mr. Sasuke, I do not care about you. Finally realizing that Sasuke and Kaneki are different people, and while he may care for Kaneki, he does not care for Sasuke and his requests. We cut back to Shimaguchi as he seems to be fighting a mysterious ghoul who is absolutely wrecking them. And after the ghoul kills them, we just see a ghoul that seems to be Kanae, wearing a mask, and now he is incredibly insane. He calls a decapitated head beautiful, and says that he needs to show Shuu the head. He jumps out the window and appears to be crawling up to the roof where Shuu and Sasuke are fighting. It then comes back to Sasuke and Shu's battle, where Haise says that if he wants to live, he should surrender, because fighting him is basically suicide. Given the situation he and his guards are in, Shuu responds by saying that his well-being
is none of Sasuke's concern and strikes him with his Kagane. We then get an inner monologue with Shuu, where he apologizes to Sasuke for selfishly turning his life to shambles, when he could have lived a quiet life. Shuu develops even more when he realizes that what Toka was saying to him back at the cafe was actually true, and says that it's very sad that he and Kaneki's life will never intersect again after this. Then we get a time skip where Sasuke is now on top of Shuu, ready to finish him off. During this Sasuke's brain is going crazy with phrases like choose and don't kill me, repeating all over to the point where he can't actually bring himself to do it. Just then, Sasuke's arm, the one that was holding the blade, gets sent flying off and he screams off in pain. We then see someone catch the severed arm, and it is Kanae, who comments of Sasuke as a castrated pig. Shuu then asks Kanae if that is him, where Kanae replies with yeah in German. He then annihilates Sasuke with his giant Kagane into a wall and causes a huge crater. He tells Shuu to wait a bit so that he can take out the trash, referring to Sasuke being the trash. Shuu tries to tell Kanae to forget Haise and leave, but Kanae doesn't care and holds Haise by the neck over the building, about to drop him, where he asks Haise why roses are beautiful, and answers the question himself, saying it's because they are plucked before they wither, inherently referring to Haise as the rose in question, and then finishes off his sentence by saying, "You will be the beautiful memory for Master Shuu." Just then, as soon as Kanae is about to drop Haise, Haise spins and kicks Kane's head straight off. As he lands, we see Haise visibly disturbed as he gets a flashback to him and Arima's training, which makes him snap. He says, "No, it's mine. My body, my eyes, my soul, my arms." But under these, there is a subtext that says, "Kill Arima." At this moment in time, the one who was awoken was Kaneki, and he kicked Kane's head off. You can say it's Kaneki because he says kill Arima, which is something only Kaneki would say, because why would Haise want to kill Arima? Kanae regenerates his head back onto his body, showing off his newfound regenerative skills thanks to Eto's torture. Kanae remarks that he lost consciousness for a second when Kaneki kicked off his head. As he continues to fight Haise, he notes that Haise seems a bit different from before and becomes enraged that Haise was able to harm his master, but before he can retaliate, he is impaled by Kaneki/Haise. After this, we get Kane's backstory to him and how the Rose Walls were eradicated in Germany. Very similar to how Tsukiyama, or now the Kane's father, stayed behind to aid in his family's escape. However, his mother and his two brothers eventually had gotten killed too. When he arrived at the Tsukiyama family household, he then tried to take the place of his family's head and become the successor of the Rosewald family, and restore the family and fulfill his father's wishes. It is here that we find out Kanae isn't actually a man, but a woman. From birth, his full name is Karen von Rosewald, but the first letter of his dead family's names he renamed himself as Karen von Romo, so his full name is just Karen. We then get another time skip in the backstory to when Kanae is grown.
Matsumai finds out that Kanae is a woman. She also finds out that Kanae is ill, which she asks when she plans to reveal her secret. Karen responds by saying that it's only a matter of time, and over time it'll become more noticeable that she is sick and is a woman. But Kanae, knowing this, that it's for the pride of her family. Another time skip happens, and Karen says that the servants all know of her secret except for Shuu, and also states that Shuu is the only person that hasn't noticed her condition. Karen then expresses the love she has for Shuu as not only as her master, but also romantically, in which her torture from Eto is able to find out that all this time, all Karen wanted was to be loved by Shuu. She then comments saying, you are presumptuous for somebody so ugly." In the next panel, we see Karen for the first time in women attire. She comments on the way she looks as a woman and says it looks scraggly, implying that she doesn't like the way she looks as a woman, which plays into her character as she doesn't like to be herself. As getting slammed into the wall, she comments on how Sasuke is not worthy of him, worthy of Shuu. The subtext continues saying, Eve ate the apple, the fruit of knowledge, to love a man. Karen then asks herself, did I want to be loved? Of course I did. Finally admitting it face up to herself and developing as a character. As Sasuke going to finish her off, Shuu attempts to pull him back to stop him, where we then get an inner monologue from Sasuke saying, "For some reason, I feel indescribable sadness. I remember the certain passage, my sweet apathetic soul." Just then, Eto swoops down and attacks Haise, finishing the quote he started saying, "Your parents didn't raise you right." The whole quote is, "My sweet apathetic soul, your parents didn't raise you right." It's a quote from Eto's book, The Black Goat's Egg, and directly applies to Kaneki as a person. This is foreshadowing to the reveal that happens later. The start of the next chapter, Haise is sent flying from Eto's attack, and Eto comments on how Kisho Arima would have dodged it. But it seems like you just like getting hit. This sentence is a callback to Kaneki's original behaviors, in which he would rather get hit than hurt someone else. Eto then motivates Karen to keep on fighting and show Shuu how powerful she has become before she dies anyway to her illness. So Karen begins to attack Haise unconsciously by kicking his head and splitting it open while yelling, "I will be loved." We then see Haise fall into his inner world where he meets Kaneki again. Kaneki tells him that he's like a baby suffocating inside of a bottle, in a way of describing his suffering. Kaneki then asks Haise, "Weren't you going to save me?" Haise then reaches out and says, "Shut up," and then chokes Kaneki and indicates how he has now regained his memory by saying, "Die, Kaneki, die. My salvation, your salvation, die. Die, die. I don't want happiness. I should have died that night," referring to Arima. "I should be gone. Kill me. Die, Haise. Die." After remembering everything, Haise now knows who he is, and his whole journey should have ended when he fought Arima. So he wonders why he is still alive and wants to die desperately. Kaneki then says, "Don't you remember? We used to get spanked all the time by somebody we loved the most." And in this scene, it shows a young Kaneki getting abused by his mother. The same mother that he claimed he loved in part 1. Or did he? See, from the start, Kaneki didn't have a great life. He was abused by his mother as a way of taking out her work stress on him. But her being the only person that he had, he fooled himself into thinking that he actually loved his mother. Then, when his mother actually died, he was left with his aunt. Where he felt isolated. There was nobody in the world that cared for him, and even his aunt verbally abused him. Here comes Hide, one of his only true friend, and possibly only drive for Kaneki to continue living. After assuming Hide had died in that tunnel, Kaneki, after faced with the Reaper, had no choice but to die. After having no ties to his life once again and his home getting destroyed, and that being Anteku, Kaneki had no ties and he wished for death from Arima. Well, after his battle with Arima, he basically quote unquote died by making a whole new personality of Haise, a personality that would have a family, friends, mentors, and everything that he wanted to begin with. But as time went on, Haise became skeptical, and his perfect little life was just a time bomb waiting to blow. As they sit and Kaneki tells Haise about the past and the battle with Arima, he states that he wanted to die, but this time, when he comes back, he wants to die in a way that will make everyone love him. Love is what Kaneki desired. How Kaneki is going to gain that now is by dying in a heroic way, like Hide did for him. Kaneki then says to Haise that he was a pleasant dream. Wake up and cry little and it's over. "Is that your salvation?" Haise asks. Kaneki replies with, "Yup," then asks, "Can you do it?" Blood streams down Haise's face and stains his hair black. He says, "Before I knew it, I thought it was okay to want." As they both merge and the text bubble begins to become clouded in black and white, Kaneki awakens. "I'm done dreaming. Good night, Haise." As Kaneki returns, he returns in fashion. He slices off Karen's arm for payback of what Karen had done to him, and while she's yelling, he slams a metal pipe through her eye. He then tells her to shut the hell up. Karen freaks out. She tries to get the drop on Kaneki, but Kaneki speed blitzes right behind her and unleashes his Kagane through her stomach. Kaneki then walks up to Tsukiyama and Shuu asks him if that's him. To which Kaneki responds with a stab wound to the stomach of Tsukiyama, saying, "Don't worry."
He then goes to go face off against Eto. After a showdown with Eto, Kaneki cuts her in half to begin to eat the remains of her kakuja, in which Kuri arrives to the roof and questions him and what he's doing. Having to keep himself under cover for his actions, he says that he was wounded badly and needed to heal, so that's why he was eating Eto's kakuja. Kaneki then explains to Kuri that the Tsukiyama and Aogiri tree were connected and plans to dispose of Tsukiyama by dropping him off the building. But right after he drops him, he glances at Karen and then drops him, making sure that Karen will save him. As he drops Shuu, Karen rushes off the building to save her master. She catches Shuu while they're both falling down the building, and Shuu says to her that he should just let him go and save herself. But Karen refuses and expresses her feelings towards Shuu. She asks him just for one request. She wants him to say her real name. Karen develops as a character because she says what she wants to do and bees herself only in her dying moments. She makes a choice that she wants to do, then asks for forgiveness from her family and everyone, living out her selfish desire of having Shuu in her arms while she's dying. In which Shuu in German tells her that don't worry, nobody will punish you, Karen. As soon as he says that, Karen shoves Shuu to the side while falling to the death on her own, fulfilling her selfish desire before her death. And she then says, a tragic life is not being able to live as yourself. A happy life is being able to die as yourself. Do I deserve this happiness? More reason why Karen had developed heavily after her torture from Eto is that all the words that she said were in German, which were her native tongue, which means that she was embracing her German background. Now, I want to take a second to talk about the second reason will make this arc very good. The stakes. The stakes in this arc are great with many characters dying. Characters like Shirazu, who I thought had a whole arc for him in this arc of development, just ended up dying, which was pretty unexpected by Ishida. I thought that was very well written, and I thought it added very lots of like tension into the story going forward because he established the fact that even characters who go through a character arc could die. Another character that I thought was very interesting when they died was Haru. I thought Haru was going to stay around for a lot longer, but Haru ended up just sticking around for this arc. I thought she was cool. She gave off Arma slash Juzo vibes, and she was like a prodigy. She was pretty cool in my opinion. I feel like she had potential to be a great female character. But Ishida's stakes are just absolutely like crazy, so he's just very good at killing off characters that people actually like. Also, we have Matsumai, who basically had death flags all over her throughout the entirety of just this arc. She just had death flags with her final conversation to Shuu to actually just like everything about her. And the last guy, we have Kijima. Kijima just deserved his death, rightfully so. Even though, like, I thought when Haru died and Kijima stepped up, like, let's do this for Urta, I thought Kijima just wasn't going to go out like a fucking bitch and just get absolutely chainsawed in his head. But it's alright. Stakes, man. These stakes are absolutely crazy. But then, finally, we have Karen's death. Now, Karen's death doesn't have to be a stake, but her conclusion was just executed very well that I have to put it here. I feel like Karen herself went through a character arc in this arc, and I feel like her development was very good. And if she stayed around, she could have been one of the top tier characters in Tokyo Ghoul. But I feel like Karen just got killed off, and I think that was a great decision from Ishida to kill her off, to keep her character very consistent. And yeah, I feel like all these stakes right here, all these deaths, even like Shimaguchi, a character that is relatively from the start of Re, just known as an absolute dickhead. Like, I don't think anyone really liked Shimaguchi. And this guy just got absolutely like wrecked by Karen. And honestly, I didn't feel no type of way of that. But I was just like, okay, so Ishida was building up this character from arcs to arcs. I was like, okay, so there's no way he's going to die here, right? And Ishida just pulls out the most unexpected shit and murders him. And I'm just like, damn, what the fuck? That's crazy. But yeah, overall, I think all these stakes are absolutely great at doing their purpose and adding much well tension into the story. That characters that you like, I like, could very well die at any moment, which is very good. So now it's my favorite moments in the arc. And obviously, no matter how many times I look at this panel right here,
I just can't get over the amount of distraught and the amount of hype, the amount of emotions I was just feeling while I see glazed, like I just glazed this one panel of Kaneki. Because everything about this sequence is legitimately perfect. I can't see a single thing in this whole sequence of Kaneki and Haise talking, their whole inner monologue, their whole conflict throughout the entire series of them going back and forth, the escapism, the themes, everything's just perfect about this. Even the speech bubbles of his white speech bubble slowly contorting with black. It's just absolute, like, amazing added depth that Ishida, more than any other writer, is willing to go to these lengths of extra detail. That's just what makes Tokyo Ghoul more rich for me than any other manga that I've ever read. Because, bro, the way Ishida can make the smallest things just be absolute, like big ass shit in the future is just fucking. It's just fucking amazing. Okay, like look at this. The chapter one, I think it was 143, where Kaneki was holding little Kaneki, the black-haired Kaneki, his hand, and he was walking through a field of flowers while he was dying. And he asked him, "You love mom too?" We didn't notice this. I guarantee you, nobody noticed at the time that little Kaneki was actually holding his chin while saying, "Yeah, yes, mom was a great person." And when he was asked about his mother, back in the torture scene, he couldn't hold his chin. Obviously, his hands were tied behind his back. But it's just like absolute like brilliance by Ishida, just be able to foreshadow the smallest things in this shit. He's just an absolute beast, man, at writing. I think he's literally like the greatest writer of all time. But this scene right here is just very peak, bro. Like it's just perfection to the finest, bro. Moving on to Shirazu's death. Honestly, Shirazu's death, I already said how it was very like unexpected and that I did not expect that to happen with him, especially since he went through a character arc in this arc. And by the way, I really enjoyed his character arc. I feel like his character was very like enjoyable as a character to begin with, with his whole motivations and shit with it for his sister. I think that's mainly though because I have a little sister and I could put myself in his shoes and kind of sympathize with him. But mainly like him dying was just had held so much impact like throughout the entire like the queues and everything. Like after his death, the queues had just split. Kaneki had come back. Like everything just went to shit after he died, where it's just like crazy. Urei's character arc was completely like finished. Or not finished, but it was going up, like, he was evolving as a character. Psycho was evolving as a character. Mutsuki was evolving as a character. All the Qs there evolved as a character basically after Shirazu's death, and that was like the cornerstone of the Q's development. So I feel like Shirazu's death was absolutely perfectly done by Ishida, man. Perfectly. I can't really tell. I might have to go and reread it to see about his death flags and maybe if there was foreshadowing before. But knowing Ishida, I'm not sure if he did foreshadow it, but I have an idea if he did. Maybe he did. I have a feeling he probably did because he's Ishida at the end of the day. But then we have one of the other moments that I really fucking liked was Furuta. You can't tell me that when you started Tokyo Ghoul Re and seen Furuta in this arc, that this guy was just some absolute crazy antagonist. Unless you got spoiled, which I hope you didn't. You can't tell me starting Tokyo Ghoul Re and looking at Furuta being like, "Yep, this guy's gonna be the main antagonist of Tokyo Ghoul Re." No, you fucking didn't, alright? Because I didn't. And I don't think anyone that was reading the manga weekly did either. Unless, you know what I'm saying, you know who Sota the Clown was, which after rereading OGTG fits perfectly to Furuta's personality and how he's just a clown and everything. But this reveal just gives off straight chills. It's just straight chills, man. Him bringing the guy in front of him, taking the hit with that cold expression. Isha's a master at delivering facial expressions, and right here he just did a great job of executing that moment of surprise, that shock factor, Then my last moment that I like to talk about, is one of my favorite moments, is actually Karen's conclusion. Karen's conclusion on first read, I did not think was like crazy. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I did not think that it was this well written. I feel like her character, after diving into this arc, I'm really starting to appreciate how well Karen is actually written. I mess with her concept of being herself. I haven't really seen that like executed in like a female character. I don't know. I guess maybe you guys could drop some in the comments, but I haven't really seen that executed very well in a female character, and I really appreciate the fact that Ishida took the time out of his day to develop and make a character like this. Also, her death was just perfect. Everything about her, her name being the initial of all her family's names, her outfit not being herself, her name not being herself, fucking her native tongue not being herself. Everything about Karen is just not being herself, which is absolute crazy depth added to her character. But yeah, those are my favorite moments. Well, that'll do it for my Tokyo Ghoul re Tsukiyama extermination video. I've been working on this video for almost a fucking month. So if you guys please just hit the like button, subscribe if you made it this far. I mean, I may have bored you the other 40 minutes of this video. This video's already really long, I understand that. But if you could just leave a subscribe button, leave a like, comment down below your thoughts. Tell me what else you guys want to see me cover, because I'd be interested to see your thoughts. And yeah, I mean, like, I love this series. I'll gladly talk about anything in this series. But yeah, see you guys later.